Welcome. We are on episode 9, series 3. It's Whisky Unscripted. I'm Gordon Dallas, and this is...
Hello, I'm Gordon Dundas.
Your best start, Gordon. That was very good. Yeah. Maybe cut the singing next time. But how are you? How's things?
I'm not very well. Not too bad at all. Things continuing to open up, so that's good from hospitality and our friends in that industry. Glengoyne Distillery will be opening for tours on Monday, the 17th, yes. I think, as will most other distilleries in Scotland, which is fabulous. And all I would say to people is, if you're not going on holiday and you're in Scotland and the UK, go to a distillery.
Great idea, Gordon. Absolutely fantastic. We have had to put up with a lot of the online, all these Zoom calls, and we've been right in the middle of it. So it's been great, but actually doing it in person is going to be marvellous. If I'm not going abroad, I will be going round as many as I can.
Absolutely, me too.
Gordon, we task you every week with looking at the whisky news. I thought, we just have a quick look back, because the last episode with Leonard Russell, we talked very briefly about doing the online Speyside Festival. Mm-hmm. And it was a huge success. You were part of it. What did you make of the other?
I thought it was great. I thought, assembled pretty quickly, done really, really well by the Spirit of Speyside Whisky Festival. Some of the events were very funny. There is always limitations on virtual. There is a limitation on it, but what they did was fabulous. And I think what we did at Tamdhu was really the way we do things, I think. And I think Sandy would probably say that. So are we going to listen to what Sandy thinks?
I was about to say, you were busy when I caught up with Sandy just to get his feedback on how it all went. So here is the manager of Tamdhu. Is he there? I don't know. Is it? There he is!
I'm here. Yeah, you've got me.
And we are joined. We are, as if I've got a production crew up the gantry. We are joined by Sandy McIntyre, manager of Tamdhu. And Sandy, how are you first?
I'm doing great, Gordon. I'm all recovered. We've got a wee bit of tough times going on up here in Murray just now with the COVID situation. Murray seems to be a hot spot in Scotland, so a bit difficult times for us, but we've all been there. We're all going through the same situation, so
hopefully
we'll get there. We'll all come out of this much better at the other end.
Hopefully. Well, let's shine a light on something that was great fun, and we've not really had a good in-depth discussion and dissection of the Spirit of Speyside online festival. You were all over it, Sandy, so could you outline how it went, what was happening, and feedback that you've had?
There's bits I can remember and bits I can't remember quite so well, unfortunately, so I'll tell you the bits I can remember. But it's a wee bit like you're doing the is he there? I feel as though I'm one of the Eurovision Song Contest judges at the moment, for that coming up in the next few weeks as well, obviously. So, but yes, Spirit of Speyside, what can I say? One of the largest whisky festivals there is, probably outside maybe Islay Whisky Festival, the Fish over in Islay. It usually brings a phenomenal amount of people to the area, and obviously this year that wee bit different in that we're holding all that virtually. But do you know what a great response we had from the members of the public out there and followers of whisky globally. We had folk on from Canada, folk on from Hungary, and we had a chance to meet up with old friends again as well, even though we're doing it remotely. It was great.
Well, before that began, were you worried? Was there trepidation among the community out there about this being virtual?
I guess there was a wee bit of, I suppose, computer concerns maybe for me. I'm getting older. The IT isn't maybe quite the same as it was years ago, and there was a new system that the Whisky Festival were using as well. So that element of things was probably where my trepidation sat. And you're always just hoping that you don't lose communications with anybody when you're doing an event. I mean, it's the most difficult and trying kind of period you can have. So fortunately, other Gordon, as he knows, works great with me, and the two of us kind of intertwine, and he picks up the bits where I suddenly disappear and vice versa.
Well, so can I stop you there, Sandy? Because it would have been easy. And no disrespect to other distilleries, if you just sat down in a room and did the tour cutting to videos.
Do you know what? We got great feedback here at Tamdhu That was one of the things. We do things live, and you know, wait, it's like doing this, Gordon. You know what I mean? You know, we don't script anything. It goes where it goes. People can ask some questions, and we'll answer the questions as we're going along.
So for your tour, for those listening, there's people listening from all over the world, hopefully to this episode 9, tell the listeners and viewers on YouTube where you started from.
Well, you know what? It was one of those days where it was a Thursday night. We were doing a virtual tour of the distillery. Try and do things a bit differently as well, and maybe throw in some oddity or whatever else. I decided this year we'd start on top of the malt bins at the back of the distillery, which was a good idea. It was a good idea in principle, right?
Yes.
It was high up, great views of the site and everything like that. But do you know what? About 5 minutes before I started doing the broadcast, it was snowing. And then a few minutes later, it was howling wind. And I'd originally got up in short t-shirt, you know, like this. And I thought to myself, what the hell am I doing? I'm a nutter up here. Standing up there in the freezing cold and the freezing wind. So quite quickly we got ourselves down from there and then into the distillery and the heart of the site. So.
Well, I was a bit late coming to it, and I thought, why Sandy got a woolly hat on? Then your camera panned back. I thought, he's on top of the malt.
I've still got it behind me here.
Yes, there it is. So it could have been so much easier, because one or two people, I did drop into a lot of the events. I agree with yourself. I thought it exceeded my expectations, because you could drop in, there was a menu, and you could pick, there's Sandy doing the Tamdhu tour with Gordon and Das. We'll drop into that. Great. And it really worked.
I mean, the unfortunate thing for us is, you know, we actually hadn't put any tasting packs together or anything like that, hadn't sent anything out to people. We did a launch on, which, you know, great, thanks yourself, Joanne, and the rest of the team that actually picked our single cast. We did the launch on the Friday night of our Dalby Alley, which is our Whisky Festival release, which you guys know, it just flies. And this year it just, what the heck? You know, it was, we couldn't keep up with the orders that were coming in. So
is it fair to say, Sandy, because I've read your notes, because you made me read them to do the tours of Tamdhu. Is it fair to say you said the Dalby Alley flew, which was unlike the train that used to go up and down that track, not nicknamed the Sputnik, which never really flew. It was the complete opposite.
It's why I was looking at some old photographs of it today. There was some that appeared up on Facebook that I was just looking at. It was photographs of the last train down the line just over 50 years ago now. So they always kind of keep on reappearing up on Facebook. But yeah, the Dalby Alley, wow, we do 1,000 bottles of it. We sold 600 of them in the morning, Gordon, which is, you know, totally unheard of for Tamdhu. We're thinking, right, okay, we held some back for people abroad. So, you know, that was one of the key strategies we had, is so there's something left for us to be able to ship abroad. And then, of course, you know, beyond that, we then moved on to our single cask as well, which, again, you know, 592 bottles there was of that. And again, that's just disappearing quickly as well. So, you know, it's a brilliant time. You know, what we missed out on this year, obviously, is this whole piece of meeting people face to face. It's, you know, sometimes it's the same faces. You know, you've been here a few times. It's the same faces. You're even coming back and having another tour of the site. That's
fantastic. And that's one of my questions, just to broaden it out, if you can, for Speyside, but even just for festivals in Scotland. How important are they as an event?
Oh, they're magnificent in terms of the whole following of our industry. We've got local clubs in certain areas as well that are attracted to different events local to them. The industry itself is very, very friendly, which, you know, we know. So there is no rivalry between us during any of these whisky festival events. It's all about socialising. It's all about having fun. It's all about introducing people to new whiskies that they maybe haven't tried before, meeting up with friends again and having a crack is the word I use.
It was absolutely spectacular. And I just thought I'd just rhyme off some of the things I popped in to see online. Balvenie, great afternoon there. Craigellachie was a good afternoon. The Gordon and MacPhail single malt portfolio was a good one. Enjoyed that. I was salivating. Glenmorangie, and I have to say, two I thought stood out, and one you were involved in. You know what I'm going to say? I'll do that in reverse. I'll do that in reverse. The other one that Sandy was involved in, we'll do it in reverse. The other one that I really enjoyed was Stephen Rankin. Stephen Rankin of Gordon MacPhail, I think he's in charge of Prestige. He was doing a tribute to his grandfather, Mr. George Urquhart.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a lovely hour spent listening to Stephen talking about his grandfather. And one thing, because I went away to research it, came out with me, and was because I was born in 1968.
Right.
Mr. George Urquhart released the Connoisseur's Choice in 1968, which
Yeah.
was aged single malts. When the whole world was looking that way for blended whiskey, George Urquhart released single malt age statements. He was going that way. Of course, the whole world followed him.
Some of the whiskies that Gordon MacPhail have got in their bonded warehouses in Elgin, it is like a real treasure trove. It really is. I've once been inside it, and you walk around and you go, "You've got that? Oh wow! Oh, how do you get that? And what, you get one of them kicking about? It is. It's like it's like going into an Aladdin's cave of whiskies.
I know, and that's something coming from you, because you've got some of the finest warehouses.
Oh yeah.
Demand.
You appreciate when you go around somewhere else. You're looking at, I haven't seen one of them for a lot of years, or didn't really realise there was any of that kicking about anymore.
Yeah, so that was a great evening spent with Stephen there. But Would I Lie to You was the panel game show, and can I just say before you give us your reaction to it, it was. Let me see. It was Sandy McIntyre, Dennis Malcolm, Alan Winchester, and you're up against George Grant, Ian Miller, and Kirsten Grant. Just explain what happened to the listeners.
Okay. Would I Lie to You is, for those that are out with the UK, it's a UK-based quiz show where there's two teams and a host, and basically people recite a story, which may very well be true, may very well be false. It can be about any particular subject you want. And then the people in the opposing team have to decide whether you're telling a big fat porky lie or whether you're telling the truth. And some of the stories that were coming out on the evening, there was two different events. There was one the following night. I was in the older group, which kind of stunned me slightly. But you know what? You're in with some real big industry stalwarts: Alan Winchester, Dennis Malcolm, George Grant. These are the names that are synonymous with Scotch round about the Speyside for sure. Worldwide names, Kirsten Grant Meikle as well, and Ian Miller. So a great group that we had, and we just had fun. It was, and I was continuing to enjoy the Tamdhu single cask, I've got to admit.
This is the same night as we'd done the launch, and there's a few drams of Tamdhu enjoyed. Then you went on to do this with more drams.
Yes. Which, as I say, that I can remember up to a point in the evening, and beyond then, there's not much I do remember actually. But it was this whole piece around people's imagination that they could make up some great stories. But beyond that, it's actually the great stories that are true. I know. Because in our industry, there has been characters over all these years. Becoming less and less and less perhaps now, with the way that technology is coming along and health and safety has been introduced. But if we think back 30, 40, 50 years, and that's the time scale I'm talking about for Dennis Malcolm. Been in the industry for 50 years. So he remembers the days where, the carry on that was going on and the true stories that there are. So he doesn't really need to make up anything, to be quite honest with you. And you're sitting there chuckling away to yourself, thinking that can't be true. That can't be true. And it is. Pulls up the wee true sign at the end of it. So great laugh. And then the second night there was some other stalwarts of the industry, Richard Forsyth, or young Richard Forsyth from Forsyth that make all the stills. Again, worldwide known name and business. And again, the crack was absolutely fantastic in that one.
As I love able to enjoy whiskey but have a laugh as well. It's not all about being serious and have taste as well. You just mentioned it, Sandy. One of my questions when I had you on was, what's the relationship like between you and other managers? Or you just mentioned the Forsyths. Speyside we know is an area, but is there interaction between you guys?
Oh yes, yeah, very much so. I had Callum Fraser from Glenfarclas, I should say, around here yesterday morning, just to look at a piece of kit that we've got here that they're thinking about buying. So yeah, we all interact with one another. As I said before, we might be rivals when it comes to a bottle on a shelf in a supermarket or an off license or a whiskey shop. But really, our industry is second to none in terms of the relationships that you've got. And that's one of the things that we're all saying, that even out with the festival, because the festival is a great chance to meet people, both coming in, visitors to the area, but also within our own industry. But that whole element of being able to interact with your colleagues and your peers, which we do on other occasions during the year out with the festival, we've missed that completely. And we're so looking forward to getting back to that situation as well.
Well, that just brings me on to my another section I wanted to chat to you about. But before I do, because I think you might need a whiskey for this next section, we always have challenges. Sandy, in your honour, I've decided to pour myself a little Tamdhu 15.
Great stuff. Well, you couldn't do better. What a award-winning whiskey you've got there. I've got a couple here that I'm trying out. This is for a release already that we're thinking towards 2022 for Chinese New Year for 2022, which is a release that only unfortunately goes to the Asian market over in China, Japan, I think Taiwan gets some, and we're actually talking about next year releasing some into, I think, Australia, New Zealand as well. So I haven't actually selected which one of these is going to be yet.
Well, we might help you along your way when you have a sip of this. That just, again, there's so many things firing in my head. How far are you thinking? How far ahead are you and your team thinking?
We're already, we'll obviously come out of the festival. I've already got some plans in my head for next year's festival in terms of events. We want to maybe introduce something a bit different again to the site. And again, welcome visitors back, obviously, because it's their only chance to have that at Tamdhu.
Yeah.
We're working on this Chinese New Year release, obviously for January 2022, really that is. But by the time we get that packaged up and sorted out for shipping out to China, we're nearly into June now. So we're only 6 months away from the end of the calendar year, which might seem like ages away yet, but when we actually start thinking about all that packaging, shipping, etc., and getting it out to the market, really, I'd really need to have this done within the next week.
Wow.
We're already working, and it's not a secret, on Tamdhu 18, which will be into January, well, actually probably February or March release in 2022. We've got something else exciting coming at the back end of the year as well. For next Dalby Alley 5, we'll probably be starting work on that in August, I would imagine, in July, August. So we're probably about six months ahead of when we're actually doing any releases.
That's fantastic, Sandy. It really is a comprehensive answer there. But I just thought you could maybe help me. Reading, some articles and chatting to some of my friends, slowly we're emerging out of lockdown, and there is now talk about going into bars. There's now talk about what we'll do when we get a whiskey club together. And I just thought Whisky Unscripted could maybe give a little bluffer's guide to staging a whiskey tasting. Now, there's various ways you can do it, Sandy. I hope you might help me out. Yes or no, or suggest some. So,
okay, go on then.
You can do 3 whiskies or do 5 whiskies while we're sampling a lovely Tamdhu. Sandy, suggestions for, well, let's go an easy one. Let's start with your distillery, Tamdhu. If you were going to suggest people out there to do a Tamdhu whiskey tasting, what would you do? How many whiskies and what would they be?
Well, I'm working actually with a tasting that I'm maybe going to be involved with towards the end of June. So again, probably thinking about 6 weeks away. And some of the suggestions I put to them, because Tamdhu is only matured in sherry cask. We know that. We've spoken about that before, Gordon. So we're only ever matured from day one right till the day we're taking the liquid out the cask in Oloroso sherry casks. So what I'm working with is, I'm not going to say a deconstruction, I suppose a reconstruction of Tamdhu, because I would like to work with some new make spirit, would like to work with some Oloroso sherry, and then go into some of our young expressions, our 12 or 15-year-old, and then even go down the differences between European and American oak casks. So that gives me 5 or 6 liquids. Obviously, we're only talking maybe there are 4 whiskies, but a new make and actual Oloroso sherry that we use for seasoning our casks. Wow. And I think that actually tells a story from the liquid coming from our spirits, the seasoning of the cask, and then what's actually happening in the cask.
There's a lovely idea for a whiskey tasting. If you could get that together as a whiskey club out with being inside like Sandy is, good on you, but that's a lovely idea. But even getting the Oloroso sherry, if you've not got access to new make spirit, if you're a whiskey club, that's a nice idea.
Well, even exploring some of, if you were doing it differently, Gordon, another one is to explore some of the cask finishes if you were wanting to have some other whiskies there as well. So again, go Oloroso, go some Pedro Jimenez, and then go to some whiskies that are actually been finished in either or matured in either of those casks. and or some red wines there as well. There's so much you can explore around.
That's a lovely.
One of the whiskies I tasted actually, because we had a fourth event up here at Tamdhu during the festival, and we did it. And you're speaking about, do you ever get in touch with other managers? We did that, and it was a celebration of Speyside. Basically, Speyside in 2020 did exceptionally well at the IWSC Whisky Awards. Basically, in terms of the gold awards that were announced that year, absolutely brilliant. So we actually pulled together the distillery managers from the distilleries that were successful in obtaining golds, and we pulled together some of the whiskies. Now, that was, to me, the highlight, and I'm only a wee bit disappointed in that I was still a wee bit hungover from the night before, because this was, Friday night was a wee bit more heavy. The Saturday night, I had these fantastic whiskies, some Balvenie Caribbean cask, some Balvenie 40-year-old, I had some Tamdhu 1973 vintage, we had some Aberlour 14-year-old, great whiskies, and competitor whiskies to us at Tamdhu as well. But actually sampling that with your colleagues who were doing it remotely, so I had the Joe Reevely from Tamdhu, Graham Cruikshank from Aberlour, Stuart up at Glenfiddich, and Lauren at Balvenie. We sat together and we explored each other's whiskies remotely from one another, sampling them, and brilliant whiskies, award-winning whiskies, absolutely phenomenal quality. That Caribbean cask with Balvenie, an absolute stoter.
So we can do a Speyside by region. I like the finishing night, I called it. So yes, the Caribbean cask you've mentioned, rum cask. So a finishing night. Another would be maybe an international night, which of course we could start in Scotland and we could go possibly to America. Sandy, I don't know your knowledge of bourbon is.
Well, no, I'm not a big bourbon fan, to be quite honest with you. But why jump over the pond quite so quickly? Why not even just do a UK? So we've got Welsh whiskey, we've got Penryn, we've got the Lakes down in England. A number of different whiskies now down in England. But the Lakes is a cracker, and then you go across to Ireland, and you've got that triple distillation that's going on over there. So you've got that real light stuff as well. So you could even just do a Great Britain or UK event. And just exploring, and if you wanted to split Scotland into the regions there as well.
It's a lovely thought as well, doing the UK night. Yes, you can go around the world, I'd imagine. We had a few episodes ago, Susan Elstrom from the Cardrona Distillery
in New Zealand.
The South Island. Yep. Yeah. So you go the States for potentially a bourbon or a Tennessee whiskey, New Zealand's Cavalan's quite a big whiskey. Taiwan.
I think we sometimes tend to forget that whiskey isn't just Scotch. Whiskey is absolutely global now. And the thing that astounded me with that one was taking part in the judging of the World Whisky Awards. I think probably 3 years ago now.
Oh, right.
4 years ago, and it was an all-day event, and it was bringing in whiskies from Israel, from Egypt, from New Zealand, from South Africa, you name it. It surprised you sitting there thinking, I didn't even know they made whiskey there. Yep. So exploring some of that, and some of them are quite young and new into the industry. So again, they're maybe trialing different things. And I'm not going to say restricted, that's the wrong word, but the Scotch Whisky Act puts constraints on us in terms of exploring some certain things. Some of those other new emerging regions don't have those constraints. So they can maybe do things a wee bit differently as well, and it introduces other flavours.
If you're listening to this on iTunes or Spotify or even watching on YouTube, I'd love to hear some of the suggestions for whiskey evenings you can put together. And that's some great suggestions there, from the UK to international to a finishing night as well. You could go vertical tasting within one distillery, or you could have something else I haven't thought of. That maybe you didn't think of.
That's it about this whole industry, Gordon. Is that you've got this whole range of different things to explore and taste and find out whether you like it or not. And you know what? There's ones you'll not like, and the ones you go like that. And God, I wish I'd found that 5 years ago.
And my question before we wrap up, and I might just get to this, palate. How was it being a judge? That's some people's dream job, being a whiskey judge, but pressure. And is the palate overwhelmed?
It was. I've done it on smaller events, but doing it on the scale of the World Whisky Awards, it was down in London. Flew down to London from Aberdeen for the day, pretty much. And you know, by the time I was coming back, because I started to actually drink them, rather than maybe just spitting them back out again. So it depends what you want to make of it in terms of that judging bit. You could get absolutely hammered if you wanted. But they kept on just keeping on bringing trays of drink out going. It would be a dream night out for you Glaswegians.
So it would be. That's how you got on that panel. Sandy, you've been absolutely fantastic. I know you're a busy man. I've got a challenge for big Gordon Dundas. I just wanted to run a couple of them by you, see if they're too easy or too difficult. Are you up for a challenge?
No, don't put me under any pressure.
Okay, so this is the absolute quiz that's taken the world by storm. I've got the answer. What's the question? So the answer to this question is 51% corn. What's the question?
What are the Americans doing with their bourbon and experimenting?
You'll almost get. I'll give you 3/4. It's really just what's the legal definition for a bourbon. That's the
right, yeah.
51% corn. Let me see. Here's one closer to home. Little Dark or Sinister Hill is the answer. What's the question?
Come on, that's what's the translation of Tamdhu?
Yes, we get that a lot. A lot.
We did some filming with the BBC last week, yeah, and that was one of the things we were talking about during that filming.
Is it true, Little Dark or Sinister Hill, that in the days before legalisation, is it true that maybe that area they wanted to get the rumours going that there was nasty things happening? Keep away.
I don't know about that. There's maybe nasty things happening now, but you know, you look at that whole story of actually whiskey distillation in this region as well, and it was very much you know, illicit stills running up in the hills. So maybe there was something going on right about here.
I know. Who knows? And my final one, Sandy, nice and easy for you though. The answer is, well, they're the two companies who made mills to malt the barley. So successful they were, they went out of business. What's the answer? What's the question?
Yeah. Porteous and Bobby.
Yes, what are Porteous and Bobby?
They're still the stalwarts. They're still built like chieftain tanks. You know, they're still there. They'll be lasting for years to come. They'll be there after I'm left, that's for sure.
It's extraordinary. You've got the Bobby one, and these guys went out of business. Just kept on going.
Yep. So
well, Sandy, I'm going to raise a glass, and hopefully we both
cheers.
keep on going.
I've decided what's the next Chinese New Year here. As far as you're concerned, all it is 473. Okay,
right.
This is Chinese New Year next year, but Slainte just now, guys.
Oh, thank you, Sandy. That's been immense. Cheers. Thanks very much, and all the best.
Good to see you guys.
Cheers, Slainte. Ah.
Fabulous. It was a great time. It was a great time, but it's not as good as when we used to go up there. Next year we'll be doing that, Gordon, and you and I will probably by the Saturday night be a few whiskies down. Would that be fair?
And an emotional. Very briefly, Gordon, Sandy mentioned there about being a judge at the World Whisky Awards. Have you ever been a judge at any of these whiskey? Because that's what a pressure.
I haven't, and I've been asked if I'm honest, but I haven't done it. Mainly because I've never been here enough in the past. I have been asked to be a judge at the World Whisky Awards, I think, but if I'm honest, I don't think I'm the best person to do it. I think there's people with better noses than me. My nose is not actually great. I think I suffer from sinuses and things, so I don't actually have the best nose in the industry at all. I mean, really average, but maybe better on taste. But yeah, it's just something I've never sort of taken up on. But I remember speaking to Dave Broom about it, and Dave's somebody I just, I love everything he does. I think he's fabulous. And I said, so how do you actually go about if you get a flight of 20 whiskies? What do you do? And he goes, well, you can't just drink them all and sample them all because your palate will get tired and the last ones won't get the appreciation that they get. So he says, actually, what he noses them and has a little sip and spits, of course, and he'll go along and back along, and then he'll add water and take the alcohol out. So if you've got a whiskey at 40%, add water to make it 20%. You take the alcohol effect out, you get more of the sort of flavors coming through, less of the alcohol. So there's quite a lot of ways of doing it, but I've never. It's something I've never done. Mainly because of time. But
because of time, and I hope you appreciated I was trying Sandy out on I've got the answer. What's the question? He did not bad there, as you saw. He did not bad. So I just gave him a wee, and I've got no time to go into too many, but I've just got a couple for you, and we'll maybe do this in our finale show of this series, which will be next episodes. And I thought, here's the answer, and you can have multiple questions.
Okay.
Here's the answer: Johnny Walker. That's the answer. What's the question? Now, this game that we're playing can have many questions, but I'm just going to tell you, Johnny Walker.
What's the biggest selling Scotch whisky?
There we go. That's fantastic. You could also have which whisky teamed up with Game of Thrones to release a special.
Yeah. You could also have which whisky was originally based in Kilmarnock.
1820. So this game, we really want to try and produce this game next week. Gordon, we introduced him because I've just completed this interview because of time. So could you explain what's happening next on Whisky Unscripted?
Yes, well, we have always tried to bring you a different element on this, whether it is stupid quizzes, whatever. But where Gordon and I, when we actually seriously thought about doing this initially, it was all about what can we as a producer bring to a podcast that's embracing the whole industry. And we have done that, we hope. But we also wanted to bring you some knowledge, whether it was from production, whether it was from Ian McLeod in terms of marketing. So we've had Katie, brand manager, on, who's just had a baby. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Or we've had production. We've had, different people on talking about production.
Jason with the Cooper, Sean from Tamdhu.
Exactly. So what we wanted to do was to take that to the next level. And we thought we'd speak to one of our longest running distributors. We wouldn't call him a distributor. We would call him a partner. And it's Patric Lutz, and he works for Charles Hofer, which is our business what's the word I'm trying to say? Looks after us in Switzerland across some of our brands, and that's who we're going to speak to. So I think Patric is coming in shortly. Without
much further ado, let me pass you on to two of the most handsome and attractive interviewers in the business. Well. That is two of the best and most attractive people in the studio to pass over to us. So thank you very much. Gordon, nice to see you again.
Yes,
just to speak to you a minute ago. But this is the part of the show we call the Insider's Guides. Could you do the honours and introduce our esteemed guest?
Well, we are joined on Whisky Unscripted by Patric Lutz, who is our partner. I'm not even going to use the word distributor in Switzerland. And Patric, you've been in this industry a long time. You've worked with us a long time. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the two Gordons.
I'm now, can I just say to everybody, I'm feeling left out. I'm the only person who's not in a sauna.
How comes in a sauna? Just because you have wood on the wall doesn't mean it's a sauna.
Thank you, Patric. Thank you.
Might be in Scotland, but obviously it's not tea around here.
No, of course. I just had to say that. I'm joking.
No problem at all. The phone will stop ringing in a second.
It's okay. It'll be all those orders for the Glengoynes coming in.
Cases and cases.
Yeah, in a very busy office. Can I just ask, before Gordon asks you the first question before the first question is, where are you physically speaking from? What town, what city? Just paint a picture.
Okay, good. I live in a very, very small village in the Swiss mountains at something around 10,000 meters above sea level called Châteaudet. It's basically where I have my office. I live here. So if I walk very slowly, it takes me 32 seconds from the bed to the office, which has been, especially the last 18 months, has been very handy because obviously home offices, they're not so difficult.
Yeah.
But being, doing distribution, it's not that important anymore actually where you sit, because what you need is a strong connection via the internet, a good phone line, and the rest can be organized. Then not to forget, Switzerland is a very small country. If you drive more than 5 hours, you have probably left Switzerland.
Now, I'm going to, is this true? And it might not be, but a Swiss man told me this. If you add up the height of all the mountains in Switzerland, right? Okay. Yeah. It is longer than the longest distance from east to west in Switzerland.
Oh, this is probably true. I'd say it's probably true.
That's quite an interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
I think he might have been. It's true. We'll go with true.
Yeah. Let's say true.
I was going to say, I think you might have been drinking. I don't know what kind of night that was, Gordon, you were having, but you've got to get out more. Come on.
But I have to tell you, Gordon, it's not something that is normally taught at school. So it's not general knowledge that teachers say, and please be aware that. So
no, it's just
we
something
need to
that
make some inquiries, but it's fairly magical.
We'll go with true. We'll go with true.
Yeah.
Fabulous. So, Patrick, how long have you been in the drinks industry? How long have you been working with us? Give us a little bit of background before we get into the nitty-gritty of being a distributor.
You know, now we are literally 6 weeks away from the 10 years anniversary since I took over Charles Hofer, which is a 10 year, exactly, a small distribution company. I always tend to tell people we are probably the smallest among the big ones in Switzerland. And the company itself is running since 1989, so since quite a while that we are in distribution. And I have to admit, Mr. Hofer, who set up the company, it's not like he had a huge archive on when did he start working with whom. But from what I can see in old ads, Glengoyne was one of the brands that was amongst the very first ones being distributed by Charles Hofer. So since then we do it, it must be roughly somewhere in between 25 and 30 years that we look after Glengoyne. And then as you guys have been growing, we have been growing, other brands started adding onto the portfolio.
So even before Ian McLeod owned Glengoyne, you were
absolutely
Charles Hofer was distributing.
Charles Hofer, actually, we got in contact with Ian McLeod by being, back in history, Edrington's distributor for Glengoyne in Switzerland. And I don't know who, one of McLeod's guys said that we are probably one of the very, very last distributors in a country that they took on along back in time from the Edrington group that is still on board.
Yeah, wow. I wouldn't say this is necessarily correct, but I know there's a couple of distributors that we work with around the world. We work with for 20, 30 years. Yeah, exactly. Don't even have a contract with them. So, I mean,
nor do we.
Well, there you go. And I think how beautifully refreshing is that? Because it's built on trust, and it's built on, and that really does stand for something in this industry. Yeah.
Well, that's it. Sorry, Patrick, can I just say that's a great place to have a drink to that, these sentiments. So let's, before we carry on, what are we all drinking? And let's have a toasty friendship.
Patrick, what are you drinking?
Well, you know, we were talking before, and obviously I can, you are now on your 37th edition, so you have probably done all of your portfolio at one point. And I do not only work with Ian McLeod, and I was just looking at something interesting that has a bit of background story. So since my wife is Australian, I came along a sample of quite recently acclaimed Starward single malt from Australia. And one of my other partners offered me a single cask that I'm going to bottle as a Charles Hofer exclusive later in the year. So I just got a very small sample that I had, but it's a 2016 Starward.
Nice. And they've done some really good stuff. And just as a little side note, we were speaking to some friends, obviously, in New Zealand about the burgeoning whiskey in New Zealand, but actually Australia, I mean, it's an unbelievable market now for whiskies, and the quality of what's coming out there, really love a lot of the products, and Starward really have pushed the boundaries.
Yeah, and you know, I guess I remember years ago, a couple of years ago, I was there for a month visiting a family, and then after 2 weeks I got a bit bored. And my mother-in-law thought I was a very hard alcoholic, because I started just for fun ordering 3-4 bottles of whiskey from all existing Australian whiskey distilleries. And, you know, there were parcels of whiskey coming in that I all brought back to Switzerland. So I brought back something like 30 bottles. And that must have been 5-6 years ago. And back then there was maybe 8, 9 or 10 distilleries. But if you look at the map now, they have something like 35 distillers, and the quality has changed so much.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Yeah, and there's some really good distillers and some really good people that I used to work with as well, which is great. So great choice, fabulous.
Something different.
Mr. Dallas, what are you on?
I've decided the one I haven't tasted that's been in the background all 36 episodes. This is the 37th. This is the Glasgow Distillery, Gordon. So the new kid in the block, really, in Glasgow, and I know one of our mutual friends works there, and I first had a drink of this on the Baltic Sea on a whiskey festival. Nice people, and the story of Glasgow is a very rich one when it comes to whiskey.
Yeah.
So this is first fill bourbon casks and then finished in virgin oak casks.
So it should be a bit spicy, quite lots of vanilla, a little bit spicy. I'm sure it'll be very nice. And of course, in the last month or so, they've just bought the Spey Distillery, effectively site, which they'll move into from 2025. So now I think the current Spey Distillery, which produced this beautiful whiskey in almost an olive oil type bottle, if you know what I mean, they own the stuff on the inside. It's all quite complicated, but I think they're moving to a different. Anyway, that's sort of how it all works. So that's all very interesting.
This was the 1770, I think it's called, isn't it? 1770. That's right, the original. So
well, I am drinking. I've got my house is full of sample bottles, and it's from not just where I work now, which is fabulous and some great things. I've also got what I call a sample bottle jackpot. You just grab it, go in, pull something out. And so what I've got here, I've pulled out a bit of a belter. I used to work for Bowmore. This is a 23-year-old sample refill sherry cask, 52% alcohol, and I can't remember. I think it's a vintage 1988, and it just has that little hint of Bowmore in the 80s on it, which is that very famous note that actually was called FWP by one or two people, and it had this sort of Parma violet perfumey nose. It's a hint of it in this. FWP, it was called in the whiskey press, was French whore's perfume, and it was just this unique smell of that. Bowmore from the 80s is well known for having this aroma, and they never worked out 100% why it was. But some people really like it. I quite like it. Some people don't like it. And it was a real trait of Bowmore in the 80s. So beautiful whiskey.
Interesting, great stuff.
So right, insider's guide to being a distributor. I'll ask the really simple questions. Gordon can do the complicated. could I ask, for those that don't really know, what is the job? I mean, I know the word distributor, but what is a whiskey stroke spirits distributor actually do?
Well, that is a very simple question to answer. Would you like it in 2 or in 3 sentences? No. Well, there is several things. Obviously, there is a side which is logistics, which is the rather simple side. Obviously, buying from Scotland, bringing in, making sure customs are happy with all the documents you show them, paying the bills, and making sure that the clients in Switzerland get hold on the whiskey that you try to distribute. But I believe the much more important side of it is also to create emotions, to transmit the idea behind different brands that we distribute, to be present in the market. And this is why, if you look at Charles Hofer, is not a brand that is commonly known by consumers, because we always try to shine through the brands that we present. I am much happier if someone walks in and says, "Oh, this is the guy that is the guy from Glengoyne." I don't care that they don't recognize me as being the guy from Charles Hofer, but it means we have done something correct. And obviously, it's creating this base, keeping contact with, journalists, with specialized stores, with opinion leaders, also with supermarket buyers, etc., being present at shows, all these kind of things. So ultimately, we always see us outside of Scotland, the place to go if you have a question around the brands that we distribute.
So Patrick, I'm interested in the bit that maybe people forget a little bit, and that is actually the physical element of getting the whiskey into your market. So when I see vans, I haven't seen a van leave Broxburn for many a year nearly, but we see lots of lorries taking our products, and I wonder where that one's going. Or they'll obviously go in containers or whatever, depending on where they're going. How does that actually work? Because Switzerland will have different, because you're not in the EU. And so let's not mention the B word yet, but so it's a different regime. It's so how does that actually work when we get an order and we dispatch it to you? What happens?
What happens then? Well, in the very best case, a truck shows up, the pallets are ready, the documents are ready, which is with the McLeod always the case because your logistics team is very spot on. And then I work with a haulier who is very well organized because they basically do direct Scotland, Switzerland once or twice a week. So this is really the very best case.
It's a specific haulier that you work with. It's whiskey from Scotland.
Exactly. Yeah. He normally gets for different clients in Switzerland the product to his main warehouse in Bradford, and there he will load up like a 40-ton truck with products that comes only to Switzerland. The driver then takes off, goes through Dover, the canal, and comes through Switzerland, presents himself at customs, does the clearance, and then it will ultimately end up, but the same truck will then from Bradford end up in our warehouse. It could be a truck that has been coming to your box burned directly, depending on the quantity. It can be, we have sometimes imports 2 pallets if it's something very special. It can be 20 pallets, or if we coming to the end of the year.
Okay, so once the whiskey arrives with you, you obviously will be accepting orders for that from your key customers.
Absolutely.
Across all channels, do you specialize in a particular area? I mean, no. I know you do, but yeah,
we do. Yes and no, but no, we have across all channels. We have clients. Depending on what brand it is, we have direct on-trade clients because we want to be present there because it's a matter of image that, top restaurant, top whiskey bar, you need to have Glengoyne on that. It's absolutely crucial. Then we will have supermarkets, but what we are not so strong is discount. If you look at the products we carry, it's not really discounted products. Normally it's like high-end or like more specialized products. And then we will have a range of in between 250 to 450 active retailers, clients, specialized stores, etc., across Switzerland. And we keep in contact with them. It can be chains, it can be individual stores where we then dispatch it to, and where the final consumer can then go and get lucky.
And can I ask what whiskies you do distribute? We've mentioned Glengoyne. Is that your decision? Which ones would sell in Switzerland? Is that just trial and error? So paint a picture of what else or what whiskies are going down well and the ones you choose.
Okay, well, ultimately, it's several things. You can, as a distributor, go towards a distillery and say, oh, we would like to distribute you. But as we all know, the very good distilleries are properly distributed. We have set up historically a portfolio that basically has 1 distillery per area. So we will do Arran on the Isle of Arran. We will have Glengoyne in the Southern Highlands. We will have Tomatin in the Northern Highlands. We will have Glenallachie in Speyside, and we have Glengyle in Campbelltown. So my personal idea to create a portfolio was always to create something that it's not in competition to each other. I can always go to and say, you need all my whiskies, because if you want to have a very good selection and cover the areas, you need them all.
Absolutely.
And it would be much harder if you have 6 Speyside distilleries, because then, well, which one am I selling today? So I never need to think about that. Yeah.
And they all also happen to be, I mean, if you're honest, they all happen to be very similar distilleries, if you know what I mean. Family run sort of, entities producing really good quality whiskey that are, they are, run by really, really good people. They're not big multinationals.
Gordon, you got basically the essential of our portfolio, because I do not only whiskey, we do also cognac and we do sherry and we do port, etc. But the main idea for Mr. Hofer 30 years ago when he started the company was to basically represent rather independent, family-run historic companies, and we always try to get one of the top 3, not in volume, but in quality per region category. And, there are some categories that are harder to distinguish who is the top 3, but I believe, especially when it comes to whiskey, yes, in some places we are absolutely there where we wanted to be there.
Very interesting. So if we look at the market now, obviously COVID has had an impact like it's had everywhere. How is the Swiss market for I mean, it's interesting. I'd really like to get an idea of your whole portfolio of everything that you do, from spirits to cognac, and I'm a big cognac fan. how big is Whisky? Is it growing? Is the others stable? You see what I mean?
It has been a very interesting year. Whisky has historically been growing over the last 10 years, I believe for various reasons. The whole industry has done a very good job in market itself, especially Scotch whisky. It's not whisky in general, but Scotch whisky, by being very, very strict on regulations. You know what you get. And since 25 years, and there we have to say also thank you to some of the very big corporations.
Of course.
They have done a great education within the market. So if you are the only one having one product, it's harder than if you have 50 ones in competition, because the more people speak about it, the more people know, the more people wanted to know more about the product. So whiskey is a very important part. Interestingly enough, when I look back over the last year, we have been growing substantially amongst pretty much all categories. Now, obviously, you have categories that are stronger on the on-trade, which we could pick up some in the off-trade, but not everything. But generally speaking, high-quality whiskey in Switzerland, the majority is drunk in your private home, and people stay at home. Home office is very good because your boss does not only see if you're wearing pants or not in Teams meetings, but he does not always have the right side if you have already had the dram before or after lunch. Exactly. And maybe some discussions were easier because there were some drams involved.
I would agree with you. I mean, having, if you take cognac, I think cognac, I'm a big cognac fan. I learned a lot about cognac in my previous job. I represented Courvoisier, and what I really learned about cognac was that it's a fabulous product, but it's a blend of a lot of different farms and all in one bottle. That's all those beautiful sort of different areas within cognac. It's a very different product, but one thing I would say is it's a much narrower product in terms of its taste profile. So if you look at the big 5 cognac houses, the narrowness of the taste is, there is a difference, but it's not anywhere near as big as single malt. And I think that is a success. I think exactly what you said. We work as an industry to move forward as well, much better than I know the cognac houses don't really get on, and that doesn't help them either. So you don't see shows like Cognac Live anywhere or anything, there's whiskey shows everywhere, and there's no cognac shows. And that's probably, I think, an element of the sort of community of whiskey growing.
Absolutely. So on that point of whiskey shows, I want to ask you about the future of the whiskey show, but how...
Gordon's desperate for a trip to Switzerland.
Can I just say, I was absolutely gobsmacked, it's a colloquial expression here in Scotland, when I got off the train in Luzerne for the Whisky Sheaf Festival, turned the corner after I dropped my bags off, and there was a pipe band. I thought they'd flown a pipe band over from Scotland. It wasn't. I think it was locals with the full tartan regalia.
I love it.
And the bagpipes.
And they were playing just for you.
Yes, I couldn't believe it. Never drinking whiskey-soaked bratwursts. It's wonderful. So
and did you arrive in Switzerland, Gordon, with your Dairy Lee Dunker, or had you eaten it by then?
I don't, my wee satchel. Yes, it was empty. I was starving. But how important are these whiskey festivals for the category of single malt and whiskey?
Well, I believe a festival is basically the best point where you can emotionally touch the final consumer. And you have been at our show, so we have a lot of our distributors coming, of our partners coming and that are present. It's also the good thing that you see a difference is when we have like 10, all our Scottish plus the guys we have from England, the guys we have from Wales present as well, that everybody gets along, everybody's interested in what the other ones do. But it's literally where the consumer can go and see you, one of the 2 of you, or from another brand, and basically speak directly and get the feel of the brand itself through a personal experience. And most of them will also share, like, oh, I've been there, is this such and such still in the visitor center, etc., etc. So I believe this is quite important. Although when the brand is established, then we see Gordon is hanging up the Zermatt pictures in the background.
If you go to YouTube, if you listen to this on iTunes or Spotify or Google podcast, if you go to YouTube channel, you can see that Gordon, to curry favour, has decided to place in the background's a lovely Zermatt's picture.
Carry on, Patrick. Sorry.
No problem at all. That's great. No, so this is literally, yes, the shows are important. I believe they are very important for new brands. They're very important for new products. If you want to launch something, you want to explain something. And I do believe you can go a year or two without a show, but then it gets harder and harder to transmit this. And obviously it's easier. Obviously, if you guys come 3 days, yes, it's a lot of time consuming, but you're there 3 days. If it's a good show, you will see, in the very best case, 2,500 final consumers. If you do the same in masterclasses or in-store promotions, you will need, for the same amount of time, you need like 3 weeks traveling, etc., etc.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I think obviously with the lack of global whiskey shows, I actually think they'll come back bigger and stronger, because I think there's more demand for them, because, you know, drinking and whiskey is a social thing, and it's more where everybody meets up at, far less the whiskeys, if you know what I mean. It's a really social aspect.
Absolutely.
That was my addendum onto that was the future. Have you heard anything on the grapevine?
At the moment in Switzerland, we hope that after the summer, whenever this is, we should be finding some kind of new normal, so to speak. Now, at the moment, they are working on what kind of restriction or what kind of, you know, like security networks you need to have. But as soon as there is some planning security, from what I hear, in Switzerland, they're trying at least Whisky and More in Geneva, or then later at the end of November, the Whisky show in Zurich should be back on. So these are normally trying to plan something also because there is such a high demand from consumers.
Yeah. And so if we have a look at, for example, not just our portfolio, but whiskey in general, I mean, if you've got we've got, you know, a 10 and 12-year-old, very different whiskies, although, you know, 2 years difference and things like that. And then we have something like a 30-year-old at a £850 price point, and pretty much everything in between. When you get I mean, how do you sort of target where you're going to sell a 10-year-old or sell a 12-year-old, or do you pick a channel that you're going to sell it in, or and then how do you sell these? I mean, a lot of people ask me, how do you actually sell an £850 bottle of whiskey? So
that's a very good. Normally, I am very happy or very lucky. We have a portfolio where literally liquid to lips sells every bottle. So my job is easier than if I had to sell something that would just be good because there is a Swarovski stone on the bottle. But when you open it, you don't feel that great. So that's a different story. Yes, obviously, you will channel certain things. You have a specialized whiskey store who might say, I want to have the full range because I love, so to speak, Glengoyne. They will have from 10 to 30, everything. Then, obviously, if you try to go wider, it has also to do with allocations. Let's say Glengoyne 18 years old is something that I don't really work a lot for it, because 3 months of the year we don't have stock to sell because it's very limited. Because it's on allocation. It's fine, but then you are not targeting any bigger account for that. So normally you would say 10 or 12 will probably in a Glengoyne portfolio be the ones that you try to then say, do we have potential volumes that can be done? And then you will try to find that. Now, on the other aspect is obviously at the moment a bit less, but a lot of Swiss consumers travel to Scotland, because if you are within whiskey, I don't know many that have never been. And being at a distillery, normally you don't go to try the 10-year-old, but you rather pay some extra and you try the 25 and 30-year-old, because it's the bottle you can afford, but you want to pay the money only if you really like the whiskey.
Sure.
And I believe, especially there, the shows are very important, because let's say a 10-year-old, I buy it. If I don't like it that much, when my friends come over, let's crack it open. Tomorrow it's empty and it's done. The 30-year-old that I drink maybe with my wife, eventually with my best friends, I want to be sure to spend that money. And then I'd rather go to a show. And as you know, in Switzerland, you have to pay per dram when you go to a show, and you rather go and pay 20 or 40 or 50 quid for a dram, and you taste it and you say, yes, that is what I want to invest in. It's like a car. You don't buy a Maserati without test driving.
No, absolutely.
You could do it, but probably not.
I mean, I didn't drive my Ferrari, but you know, that's fine.
Married up capture, I just bought it like that.
Yeah,
Just,
you had a second one because you got a 10% discount.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I mean, I always say, and you know, and I would actually say this from a perspective of the wider whiskey. If you're a big Glengoyne fan and you've tasted everything and you love it and you buy it regularly, if you ever go to a whiskey show, if I'm honest, it's the last stand you should go to. Really, you should go and try a whole load of other things. And I mean that. And you know, if you're any other brand loyal drinker, absolutely stay with that brand. It means a lot to you, whatever. But get out and try a whole load of other things, because that is what whiskey's about. And we see now, and we're seeing it here, I'm sure Switzerland's the same, people moving around the category much more than they ever used to. So peated whiskies, unpeated whiskies, sherry casks, whatever it may be. Are you seeing that in Switzerland as well?
Absolutely, yeah. You know, when you speak to consumers, most of them will say, I love that distillery and I have everything. But normally they will have a wide selection of other whiskies that I've tried that I might like as well. And then ultimately, whiskey is something that's to do with mood, with temperature, with who you drink with. Absolutely. So I don't, personally, even I don't believe there is one whiskey that fits all moments and everything. So the beauty is to be able to compare, to try, to change, to adapt to the weather situation.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Just since this is Whiskey Unscripted, and you've just mentioned about the whiskies, could you give us, you know, you've mentioned about the 5 whiskies I think you bring into Switzerland, just a little sentence on each of the whiskies for our listeners to get a little flavour of the whiskies that you import.
Okay. Well, I don't really think I need to say a lot about Glengoyne. You've been talking a lot about that. We know the whole range. So this is our part also when it comes to being completely unpeated and very sherry driven.
Yes.
This, I believe, is the keynote there.
Yeah.
Then when we go to the farthest west, Glengyle, Campbelltown, obviously that covers this beautiful, independent, slightly peaty, salty freshness with a very, very well balanced distillate at the base. When we come to the Isle of Arran, is probably it's a younger distillery, you know. Obviously they are just
about 25 years
25
old.
We're just counting, just over 25 years old. And I always tell to say, you know, this is the oldest distillery of the new ones that pop out everywhere. So Arran has probably been over the last 20 years the most versatile, because they have tried everything that you should and shouldn't try, and now over the last 3 years come back to an amazing portfolio that is clear now and that reflects absolutely their beauty.
And before you go any further, can I just say, if you want to hear Ewan Mitchell of Isle of Arran, who's their managing director, series 2, episode 8, we had Ewan on talking about the Isle of Arran.
Absolutely, great stuff. Also a guy, you know, whenever I remember, also one of these, you know, ever working for the same company, whenever I know them, he has been the guy that was there in the office running the things.
He was at Springbank, went to Arran. He's been at Arran for about 15 odd years.
Exactly.
And he is one of the good guys. Not that there are any bad guys. He's a top man.
No. He's the guy that was still working with Charles Hofer when we used to send fax orders. And Mr.
He's still doing Campbelltown.
And Mr. Hofer did not speak a very good English, so they were trying to decipher the order that was written in half German English with a dictionary.
So that's I've had Springbank, Glengoyne.
Then when you go further up, obviously with Tomatin is a distillery that has, to me, an amazing history, a bit like Glengoyne as well. You know, it's a distillery that's been around for over 100 years. Huge distillery that has been put, especially Tomatin, a lot of work into wood policy and maturation over the last years, and gone a different way. You know, Glengoyne, we are sherry, sherry is the core. Tomatin went the other way to have like different expressions, working with virgin oak, with port cask, with oloroso, etc. So also a very interesting, very well-balanced portfolio.
And they've just brought out a French wine collection or something, is that not right?
Absolutely.
And for those out there, Series 2, Episode 4, Scott Adamson was on talking about tomatins.
Good old Scott. Had him like last week on a presentation of their lightly peated whiskies. They do the Cubocans,
Very good,
which is
very good. Yeah, very good.
And then obviously the last adding to our portfolio, which was Glenallachie. We used to do Glen Rosses historically, but when the Berry Brothers sold the brand, we stopped distributing that. And we're very lucky to get Glenallachie on board. And Glenallachie is, I believe, a promise to the future. As we know, Billy Walker came in and changed radically what happens at Glenallachie. And I was discussing with some consumers the other day, if you look at 12-year-old that came out just when they took over and the 12-year-old they do today, you see the potential that you have in a very classic yet maybe a bit more interesting Speyside distillery as the mass, maybe, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I think Glenallachie, what Billy's got the magic touch. He does some really good things, and I'm Valley of the Rocks. Did you know that?
Yep, absolutely.
Did you know that, Gordon?
No,
that's what Glenallachie means. Valley of the Rocks.
This is also like people always say it's the logo is out of Flintstones, but it's not. It's basically
I wasn't going to say that.
The Valley of the Rocks. It is actually an artist who has carved it out of stone, and obviously this is an ancient way of carving. The letter, so the logo has a meaning behind it. So
I know it does, but people have said that to me as
exactly,
well.
and it's not the truth. There is a lot of thinking behind it, and when you know it, it's beautiful what is done behind it.
No, it is, and so they're five great distilleries. So what? Give us a flavour of one. You obviously got a bottle of Edinburgh Gin behind you.
Yeah, I do.
Well, we don't talk about gin on here, but that's obviously part of our portfolio. We've got Smokehead as well, which gives you a really heavily peated, which you don't have with. So you really have got and an Islay obviously as well.
Exactly. You know, the thing is, find yourself an Islay distillery is not that simple nowadays. No. And we were lucky because we had that covered. Yeah, I have a single malt from Islay. We don't know what's inside. But we then always focused on a Smokehead. So we have a single one from Islay. So this we cover nobly then with either brands, or then I also work with Berry Brothers in London, and with them we do our independent bottling. So I have Carl Islas, I had Lafroigs, etc., which we then bottle as exclusives for Switzerland, single casks, where we can round up our portfolio. But the main focus has always been on literally the distilleries we represent here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say it now, and I will say it. There is no other single malt in the whole market like Smokehead. It really does stand out, and
absolutely.
And a lot of people.
You know, I have also you haven't seen behind. You know, for instance, this is something also, so it's something you guys do, so we can cover also a very interesting side of maybe the flavor profiles we don't have amongst the distilleries.
Yeah. No,
I can just say for our listeners, because we're talking over Zoom, so Patrick just held up a Six Isles, which is a blended malt from 6 of the Scottish islands. One of my favourites.
Again, is a there's no other product like that. So
that's lovely. I love that.
You know, I think I would guess from your perspective and from everybody's perspective, what you want in a product is a unique selling point. Having a blended malt from 6 different islands is a unique selling point. There is nothing else like that. And Smokehead, well, I mean, it's pretty unique for sure. So yeah, absolutely. And so you were last over here, Patrick, in March, like literally about 2 weeks before
we were lucky to get home.
Yeah.
We landed, we came out of the airport and they shut down. No, not exactly, but it was literally like 5 days or 10 days
before the whole world went.
Exactly. Yeah, we were already saying, "Oh, shouldn't we?" Etc.
Yeah, there was. Well, we were holding for want of a better word, it wasn't a conference, but it was a gathering, and a lot of people unfortunately pulled out because of what was going. But Patrick was there with the Swedes were there. There was many others there. Exactly. It was good few days.
Absolutely, yeah.
It was a great night. Very
It was
good
good
night.
fun. It was good fun.
It was
Right.
the official launch of the rebranding, and then it was
Yeah.
very important for us to know what was going on, etc. And
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
yeah.
it's part of what we do as well. There is no distributor I haven't visited myself yet, and it's also this, to keep in contact, to be on site, to understand, to touch the product, because I do believe also my sales team, whenever I can, I take them along with me, not because they need to go traveling. We sell in Switzerland, when we are not at home, we don't sell. But it's so much easier to sell if you have touched the product, if you have seen, if you've spoken to the people, because ultimately, you know, I have a very strong belief what we do is luxury, and nobody needs what we do, or normally when they need it, they normally go lower in quality than what we sell. So the main thing we sell is emotion, and the emotion is bigger when shared. So if we can give you an emotion whilst drinking, doesn't mean you drink more, but you should have a more relaxed feeling because you have a great drink that is shared with great friends, great people, or you get a smile on your face because there was this amazing, very charming lady giving the tour at Glengoyne, or there was, I don't know, some very special looking distiller guy or something. Yeah,
exactly. And, you know, I mean, you know, Gordon, you've worked at Glengoyne, and, you know, even when you say to people, well, actually, you know, when you walk from the car park into the distillery, you're changing over regions. Everyone will go, well, yeah, okay. And we know it doesn't make any difference to the whiskey at all. But actually, when you go there for the first time, you go, oh, this is me going into the Highlands.
exactly.
Like, you know, it means something. And, you know, you can talk about it and show a video, but when you do it yourself, that's in a very simple way, you absolutely get it into the other aspects of what we talk about, slow distillation, quality of casks, etc., etc. And it's true of most distilleries. It's not just Glen. It all just sort of, I'm sort of got it now, you know. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, did you know this? And this comes from the Ewan Mitchell interview. Lag, their new distillery. Absolutely. You probably do know this.
I do know that. I was there actually when they launched. It was my birthday, the day where the cask owners were invited. And, you know, as a company, we already own 3 or 4 casks there, as in for the future. Great, promising stuff also coming up for the future, and obviously bringing in some extra peated style.
Yes, and this is my point.
Maybe some style similar to what you have in your glass.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, are they all similar ppms?
Yeah, exactly.
But
actually, you can see.
But I think we discussed with Ewan. Oh, wait, Patrick. I think when we discussed with Ewan that I think, and I might be wrong on this, but I think I'm right. Lag will become, because the south of the island of Arran is in the lowlands. And so Lag will become a lowland peated, heavily peated whiskey. Is that right?
And for the camera, for YouTube, again, Patrick's holding up a sample bottle of Lag.
It's Lag new make.
Oh,
at 63.5.
And is it really, really good?
Absolutely. You could drink this as a neat drink.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. I can also do the same because I like that as well. I can also, I am a big fan of new make. So I have also a bottle of 68% Glengoyne new make. And this is amazing because you can basically pour that and drink it neat. So good it is. But you have 2 different beasts. So you have here something very green apple fruity, and here you have something really misty, dark, salty, meaty. Yeah, absolutely.
And coming on to the final thing that I want to talk to you about, which we'll have some new make for maybe in a year and a little bit, is Rosebank.
Absolutely.
So Rosebank, obviously, you know, from your perspective, we released the 30-year-old, which I know you had an allocation of.
I did.
I assume that went fairly quickly. Would that be fair?
Within 48 hours.
Wow.
And
amazing.
The demand was still higher than the offer.
It wasn't cheap. That's right. Is that fair to say? It wasn't too low a price. It was quite expensive.
Yeah, it was. But
I mean, I think
it's history.
It's exactly.
We are going to be the very last generation even able to buy this kind of whiskey. You have one there behind you. You pointed it, absolutely. And I believe this is something that people sometimes forget about this. Yes, probably, and no, for sure, the new make that will come out and the new whiskies down the line will be great as well.
Yeah.
But the 30-year-old from the old distillery will probably never be the same as the 30-year-old from the new distillery. They will come maybe very close, or maybe not at all.
Yeah, and this is my point. And when people talk to me about price of whiskies and things like that, I'm like, you know, when you're buying whiskies of 30, 40, 50 years old, they come from a finite amount of casks, you know, and you really, and certainly something even from Rosebank, you know, all these casks have been, you know, there's no whiskey being produced from Rosebank from 1993 onwards. So there's been nothing. So you are buying this little packet of whiskey, and that's what you're buying when you buy a bottle of this. It's not just a 30-year-old. It is not just a 30-year-old. It's a unique bit of history.
Absolutely. And from a perspective of being an investor, imagine going to the bank and say, I want 100 grand they're going to bury in my cellar, and I'm going to lose 3% or more every year. Yeah. And they're going to wait for 30 years. You know, every banker thinks you are completely out of your mind to do that. Yeah. So all of this is part of the things. And you sit down, you know, we are launching now a port wine from 1896. So sit down and with all these products, it's not the product itself. But let's just sit down and say we open a bottle of 30-year-old Rosebank. And let's think about what happened since the time when this was distilled, since someone decided about the cask, what happened in our lives, what happened, you know, politically, geopolitically, everything. Amazing. So this is it's a capsule full of history. It's not just the whiskey itself that is in there.
Couldn't agree more. And so
a fantastic place to stop, I think, to put a full stop on, Gordon. That's a wonderful thought.
Absolutely. Patrick, it has been as ever fabulous, and it's really just making me want to stand in a bar and have a dram with you. I can't wait to see you again, my friend.
Count on you.
And can I just put up, we don't have a league table, but can I, if we do have one, that Whisky Festival Luzerne must be up there with the most scenic, picturesque whisky festivals in the world. So we'll have to discuss that, just for visuals.
It's also the hardest to get your expenses claimed through. But carry on, Patrick.
No problem.
but no, look, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think you've given a great insight into the role of a partner. I don't even call it. I think everybody who you represent would call you a partner. You're very good at what you do, and that's why we work with you. And we're desperate to come and see you and have a drink, but and sell some whiskey, obviously. And we hope to see you soon, my friend.
Absolutely. And, same for us, to be back once for a live dram also in Scotland.
Definitely.
To see what has changed in the meantime.
Yeah. All right. Look,
guys,
take care.
Cheers to everybody. You guys as well.
Slanjava, folks.
Slanjava.
Fabulous, isn't he?
What
a guy. What a guy. I mean, you know, what a great business he's got there. Great portfolio, you know, represents us so well. And, you know, genuinely, when you go to Switzerland, so much fun out there. You work hard, but it's good fun.
It is. And I love these little gallop around all the other whiskey companies that he distributes as well. So it's a fascinating insight of what actually happens when the whiskey leaves a bonded warehouse.
Yeah, exactly.
Drive straight to Switzerland.
I see. I mean, obviously, with his business, he's got other Scotch whiskies, so it makes sense. He works with a haulier who just does that and gets all the paperwork and does it all. Works perfectly.
I love all that. What I've always liked is when you walk up a street, these lorries coming from who knows where, going to who knows where. It's amazing what happens all around you. But now we know 2 or 3 times a week there's a lorry leaving Scotland for Switzerland. And the same with other countries, I would imagine. So great, Gordon. That was a fantastic interview.
No, absolutely.
Right. I think that's the end of Series 3, Episode 9. That's Episode 37 on Whisky Unscripted.
Episode 9?
Yes. And we're back with... if it is, I've made a terrible mistake. I can't be bothered going back to take it. And we're back with the final episode of this series.
Yes, which is going to be a finale of simply banter, fun games, and a couple of other little interviews and things.
I'll just a little flavour, and I'm using that. A little flavour is the brand new world's premiere of the game show Drink, Cook, Pair, where I've given a chef 3 whiskies, and they've got to decide whether they drink one, they cook with one, or they pair it with some food. That is in the next episode. So, Gordon Dundas, let's raise a glass and say, where is it? And say, Slanjava.
Cheers. I need to go. There's somebody at the door. Bye.
Bye-bye.